An application for a patent on pigs. Are pigs an invention or the common property of all of us? Who owns the pig?
Es geht die Patentierung, die Privatisierung von Gensequenzen.
Genes on pig DNA, decoded and described by the Monsanto Corporation of America. But these genes have always been there. Will we soon be forced to pay fees for nature's heritage?
It is a very, very big business plan, and it includes control of food, from the seed in the field to the fork.
The politically charged patent is soon to go into effect worldwide. Christoph Zimmer, a farmer from Swabia, sees his livelihood in jeopardy. Is he soon to be prohibited from breeding pigs because their genetic material belongs to a corporation?
Wie kann denn jemand ein Patent auf Dinge beanspruchen, die es schon gibt? Da kann er gleich ein Patent auf Sonnenlicht beanspruchen oder dass man hier zum Kinderkriegen ein Patent braucht und nicht dann Lizenzgebühren abführen.
Monsanto, company headquarters in St. Louis, Missouri, heavily guarded like the maximum security wing of a prison. This is where the idea for a worldwide pig monopoly was born. In the lab, scientists are hard at work on an ongoing series of new patents. The goal is worldwide domination in the field of food production. An annual sales volume of more than 4 billion euros is realized here, up until now primarily by means of genetically engineered plants and seed.
Diese Oligarchien der Weltkonzerne haben ganz wenige Menschen, ganz wenige Gruppen, die haben eine Macht heute, wie sie nie ein Kaiser, nie ein König, nie ein Papst in der Geschichte der Menschheit gehabt hat. Und Monsanto ist einer dieser Weltkonzerne. Das sind Feudalherren neuesten Types.
Monsanto began by manufacturing insecticides and later went on to genetically engineer the plants themselves for greater resistance. This allowed the plants to better tolerate Monsanto's own crop sprays. Of primary importance was that everything could be patented.
Patenting is all about control, and Monsanto is all about control. You know, they're already the #1 seed company in the world, and they control those seeds through patents, through government monopolies, so they and only they can use those seeds. The common heritage of the world, the seeds of the world, are now owned primarily by one company that has them in monopoly.
The American Patent Office, USPTO. This is where Monsanto has submitted its pig patents for approval. The major question remains whether life forms should be subject to patents at all.
Patenting living organisms is settled case law here in the United States, and I do it for my clients every day.
This allows companies like Monsanto to take up a key position in supplying vital resources, involving the control and manufacture of food products. Now they are setting their sights on the pig, which hasn't even been genetically engineered yet.
It's a very broad patent that would grant, if it's accepted worldwide, would grant Monsanto control of a significant percentage of all the pigs in the world. And here's what's so critical. The patent isn't just for the pigs. It's for the pigs' offspring. So Mother Nature works for Monsanto's profit. Every time pigs naturally reproduce, that is a violation of the patent that you would have to pay Monsanto for.
In Europe, as well as in the United States, patents are not only being granted today for genetically engineered organisms, but also for naturally occurring animals. For example, lab animals. Every piglet in whose DNA inspectors find fattening gene markers could then be subject to licensing fees. How many of them are already affected? If there are too many, Zimmer says, the Betzelbergers might as well close down operations. Now, Christoph Zimmer only needs to find a lab willing to do the test. Not an easy task, because even conducting this test infringes on patents owned by the American company. At the laboratory, it's best to remain anonymous, because biotech companies like Monsanto have often sued for patent violations. This is big business. The worldwide market for pork is estimated at several billion euros.
One of the most under-publicized actions of Monsanto with its patents is its persecution of American farmers. We have just completed a study that shows that they have threatened thousands of American farmers with lawsuits for violating their patents. That over 129 lawsuits have been filed by Monsanto against American farmers, and they have reaped millions of dollars. And this is Monsanto coming in with its huge legal team, all of its power coming after a small farmer in South Dakota or Nebraska or in Indiana, trespassing on their land, making up, in many cases, making up lies about what these farmers were doing and not doing, persecuting them, and often driving them out of business. We have documented this. If this is what Monsanto will do to these farmers, imagine what they'll do to the farmers around the world. If this is what they're doing with their patents on crops, imagine what they'll do to farmers when they've patented the animals of the world as well.
Heartland, USA. Here, the corporation decides for itself which farmer they will take to court. Farmers that buy supplies from Monsanto have to sign a contract that precisely defines the type of crop sown and the methods used, and which prohibits the farmer from using his own harvest again as seed the next season. In addition, the farmer commits to purchasing new seed each year at a high price and must allow inspectors onto his land at any time. Cultivation of conventional plants that have not been genetically engineered has become practically impossible, he reports.
You know, if I'm surrounded by corn and it's genetically modified, I could lose my crop because the crop's genetically contaminated. And guess what? Then I can get sued by Monsanto for a breach of contract of trying to sell their seed. It's insane.
They said PCBs were safe. They weren't. They said Agent Orange was safe. It wasn't. And they're saying now that genetic engineering is safe. And it's not.
And where do you want to be, Monsanto, in I think 20 or 30 years? And the answer was, we want to control the global food supply.
The consultant believed that Monsanto would, through controlling intellectual property, patents, right, worldwide control, not have to worry about market share, because there would be no one else to compete against them. So part of the discussion was how to remove competition, because that's the only way that you're going to gain the kind of control that's necessary to dominate something as fundamental as the food chain. It wasn't about getting market share. It was about owning the whole thing.
Beim Werner und beim Frieder, da haben wir auch schon untersucht und haben wir festgestellt, dass bis zu 75% von den Schweinen diese Gene enthalten haben, auf die Monsanto da das Patent erhebt.
Ich denke, dass das nur ein Grund sein kann, um diese Landwirte abhängig zu machen von dem Konzern, wie es ja dann auch in dem Bereich Getreide oder Mais ja schon passiert, dass die Leute das Saatgut ausschließlich von Monsanto beziehen müssen, das Spritzmittel, das Düngemittel und so weiter, und in eine totale Abhängigkeit kommen. Wenn die pro Sau oder Ferkel, wo einen Stall verlässt, Gebühren kassieren können, ist das eigentlich eine Einnahmequelle, wo kein Ende findet. Ne? Entweder muss der Landwirt aufhören oder wenn er nicht aufhören will, dann muss er diese Gebühren bezahlen.
In the United States and other countries, there are increasingly frequent reports of problems with genetic engineering. Harvests are failing, pests are returning, and allergies are multiplying. Monsanto has worked a new clause into its more recent contracts that forbids farmers from suing the company if genetically engineered seed should fail. In some American states, farmers who feed their pigs exclusively with genetically modified corn or soy have noticed a mysterious drop in their stock's fertility.
We went on for years, couldn't figure out what our conception rate problem was. We worked with a veterinary, spent $1,000 here, $1,000 there. Nobody can figure out what was going on. And we just finally give up. For a few years, we were planting 100% BT corn. And, you know, we didn't put two and two together till you start comparing the hog records when we were having conception rate problems and go back on the tickets when we bought seed corn. what years we bought 100% BT corn. And then it all kind of coincided, fell into spot. We can't prove nothing, but it just very coincidental.
So I said we should destroy all the seed that is being produced from these trials. And when I presented that, I said, oh no, we're not going to destroy the seed, we're going to feed it, like we traditionally do.
As a young manager, Azevedo, who brought a great deal of idealism to his job, was rapidly informed of the key corporate goals.
Coming to St. Louis and talking about these ideals, I was pulled aside by one of the vice presidents, and he said, we're not necessarily about all these good things, reducing waste and feeding the world, we're about making money.
Monsanto hopes that American gene technology, patent-ready technology, will go on to conquer the world. Securing resources for itself is at the top of the company's political agenda, which is why it rapidly succeeded in pushing through approvals for the new products.
The word was cooperation with government and regulatory agencies. Now, you have to read between the lines. What does cooperate mean? I mean, you know, cooperate means you shake hands.
Enjoying an inside route to the corridors of power, Monsanto was able again and again to place employees in influential positions. Through Washington's revolving door, corporate players continually traded posts at the licensing authorities, later returning to high-paid board positions at the company. In the early 1990s, a blatant scandal played out behind the scenes at the nation's capital. It was about nothing less than the fundamental decision on whether genetically modified organisms should be allowed to enter the food supply at all. Several FDA inspectors expressed great concern after studying the test results. The government held back the papers in which they explained their reservations, however, as described by a critical FDA expert. Just as the critical FDA memos were never publicized. Monsanto had managed to place its own man in a key post at one of the authorities. Gene technology was green-lighted.
This, I believe, is one of the greatest frauds ever perpetrated by any government in history.
For the sake of a continent threatened by famine, I urge the European governments to end their opposition to biotechnology.
The concept that genetically modified crops are needed to feed the world is not only a terrible spin and lie, it actually works against feeding the world. It gives the impression, first of all, that production is the key point in feeding the world, when in fact we have more food per person than any time in human history, and 30,000 people die every day from starvation. So it's not production. The second thing is, genetically modified crops, on the average, don't increase yield. They actually decrease yield so far.
UN Special Correspondent John Ziegler recalls the resistance to gene technology at the highest political levels. Ziegler had dared to criticize Monsanto for wanting to import genetically modified seed into the African country under the pretense of delivering aid supplies, despite legislation there forbidding it.
75% der Bevölkerung, vor allem in Schwarzafrika, leben im Elend. Wenn dazu noch die Finanzknechtschaft der Patentmogule käme, dann wäre es um diese Völker geschehen.
In the USA, pig breeders like Jerry Roseman have other problems. Environmental activist Jeffrey Smith wants to help them, because Roseman has lost his entire operation.
We were told that these products were safe when we were handed them to us, and ultimately I found out that there's virtually no testing, and anyone that comes up with any kind of a problem whatsoever with it, there's absolutely no cooperation other than to bury them in paper and make them go away.
The former pig farmer says that his attempts to have the genetically modified feed tested were blocked by massive opposition.
I was totally appalled at the treatment that I received from the USDA, the EPA, and the FDA at the national levels and at the state levels. Everyone tried to make this go under the floor. Their comments from the seed corn company is that we will ignore Jerry Roseman and eventually he will starve and go away and the problem will no longer exist.
Not only at Monsanto, but all over the world, genetic researchers are studying the pig. Munich professor Eckhard Wolf has observed during the last 10 to 15 years a significant decline in the fertility of pigs and cows during exactly the same period in which they have been given more and more genetically modified feed.
Monsanto introduced the first genetically modified hormone for animals, bovine growth hormone. And what we know now is that the research appeared to be rigged to avoid finding problems. When they wanted to show that the hormone did not interfere with fertility in cows, they allegedly added cows to the study that were pregnant prior to injection. Other researchers pasteurized the milk 120 times longer than normal to try and destroy the hormone.
In Washington, Jeffrey Smith meets with a former inspector at the FDA, Richard Burroughs. The man is a true patriot with children serving in the U.S. Army. Nevertheless, he refused to license the genetic product because the examiners found the test strips from Monsanto insufficient and demanded new ones.
I mean, they could have come in and argued the science of it at a higher level and gotten it taken care of, but for some reason, since I guess I was the obstacle that had asked them to do these extra studies, which were not completed to my satisfaction, it was easier to get rid of me than it was to do the studies, and a whole lot cheaper. So somewhere in the chain of command, they made this point, and that person listened to the money and the politics and agreed that the best way was to get rid of me and keep the products. That was how they finally got me out of the end stages of the review process. They finally said, well, you're no longer competent to do your job, you're fired.
Obstacles are placed in the path of the press as well. Popular reporter Jane Acri researched for Fox News the side effects of the bovine growth hormone, such as udder infections and pus residues in the milk.
We found that there is a difference in the milk. Monsanto says there isn't, but there is. On the Friday before the Monday air date, it was going to air on the 6 o'clock news. It was a 5-part series called The Mystery in Your Milk. Monsanto sent the first of 2 very strongly worded letters that said, stop the reports, your reporters are idiots, their sources are incompetent. And a week later they sent a second letter from a New York lawyer that said that there would be dire consequences for Fox News if the story airs.
The reporter is called off the story. Her superiors decide that the report first has to be revised by the Fox News lawyers and Monsanto.
The lawyers would say, say what Monsanto says, it doesn't matter what you found, put in this, don't use the word cancer. What ended up being a re-review process went into 8 months and 83 different versions of this story, which is unheard of. Nobody does that. The end result of this 8 months of re-editing the piece was that they fired us at the first window in our contract.
The hormone is still on the market in the United States, and pigs all over the world are today fed primarily feed made from genetically modified plants. Trucks with genetically engineered soy meal are on the roads around the clock, like here in the port of Fredericia in Denmark. Per Digge imports the animal feed from Argentina. He has now been sued for patent violations by Monsanto.
At have en GMO-fri produktion i Danmark jo faktisk ikke muligt i dag, og vi kan bruge eksempler fra Sverige og Norge og Finland, hvor de har GMO-fri produktion.
On the way to the slaughterhouse, pumped full of genetically modified feed. The meat doesn't even have to be labeled as such when it comes onto the market. The long-term consequences for the consumer remain to be seen.